Those aren't mine. 3 words. They shattered 7 years of marriage in less than a second. The earrings sat like tiny bombs on the edge of the nightstand, dangling gold loops with a delicate pearl drop. Evelyn stared at them without touching. She had never seen them before. And she would know. Her taste leaned minimalist. Platinum. Clean lines. These were romantic. Too sweet. Not her. The air in the bedroom was still, heavy with the scent of something she couldn't name yet. She stepped back instinctively, as if from an open flame. Connor appeared in the doorway. His tie already loose. Sleeves rolled. He moved like someone expecting comfort. Not confrontation. She didn't turn, just pointed. Calm. Those, she said, they aren't mine. He followed her finger, paused, too long, then smiled, soft and disarming, the kind he used on board members and bank reps. Must have been one of the cleaners. You know how careless they can be. Cleaners. Evelyn almost laughed. She was the one who hired and vetted every staff member. No one had entered this bedroom without her knowing. He brushed past her, scooped the earrings, and dropped them into his pocket like lint. You're tired. EV. Long day. Huh? She didn't answer. Her eyes scanned him the way she read contracts, looking not for the obvious, but for what was missing. His shirt was pressed, but untucked. His belt buckle was off-center. And his hair, still slightly damp. He hadn't come from the office. She let the silence stretch, watching him walk into the bathroom. Water ran, the artificial sound of normalcy. She sat on the edge of the bed, the place she used to feel safest. Her gaze drifted to the headboard, then the pillow next to hers. Something lingered, a scent, floral, sugary, too young for her perfumes. She leaned in. There it was. Brittany Lane's first day rushed back uninvited. The young intern in coral heels. Lip gloss too shiny for a boardroom. Evelyn had laughed it off. She remembered Brittany's nervous hands gripping a legal pad. Her eyes scanning Evelyn's every move. You're everything I want to be in 10 years. She had said once. Voice too eager. It hadn't felt like a threat then. Back then, Evelyn had offered kindness. She answered Brittany's questions, gave her a reading list, even bought her a coffee that first week. Connor had said, she reminds me of you. In the early days. Now, she wondered, was that the appeal? Was he sleeping with a younger echo of herself? The thought landed with a thud. She walked to the mirror and caught her reflection. Still sharp, still striking, but something had faded, some softness, some glow. Not from age, but from erosion. Years of swallowing silence, of playing supportive wife to a man whose ambitions had begun to feel like a mask. Her phone buzzed. A text from Connor. Ordering Thai, green curry okay? She stared at the screen. Then typed back. Fine. Fine. The universal word for not fine at all. Later, she lay awake next to a man whose breathing was too even. Too detached. He didn't notice when she shifted. When she flinched at the scent still clinging to his shirt. She turned her back to him. Eyes wide open in the dark. He thinks I'm blind, but I've just begun to see. I co-founded this company. Now I need clearance to enter my own floor? Evelyn stood with her palms flat on the marble counter. The chill of it biting into her skin. The receptionist, a young man in his 20s with too much gel in his hair, flushed red as he tapped nervously at the tablet screen. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. There's been a change in the protocol. All non-executive entries need prior appointment now. It's new. Non-executive? Her voice didn't rise, but each syllable cut glass. I'm listed as co-founder and board chair emeritus. Since when does that make me non-executive? The young man stammered something about IT updating the access system. Evelyn didn't need to hear the rest. Behind her, the lobby of Hart Plus Lane shimmered with precision, polished concrete floors. Glass partitions. Low hum of ambient music. It was supposed to project innovation. Today, it felt like a mausoleum. A place where her legacy was being embalmed in real time. When she and Connor launched the firm 9 years ago, this space had been her pride. She remembered walking through its half-built skeleton in a hard hat, arguing that glass walls made people feel seen. Connor had laughed, teasing her for being sentimental. You and your people first policies. He'd said once, they're what makes this place human. Now the humans she'd hired walked past her without recognition. As Evelyn leaned slightly to the side, her gaze caught movement near the executive elevators. A pair of red stilettos stepped out. Brittany Lane emerged, flawless in navy silk, A clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of power. "Oh," Brittany said, feigning surprise. "Evelyn, didn't know you were stopping by today." Evelyn offered a tight smile. "I wasn't aware I needed to announce myself." Brittany gave a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "We're rebranding, internally too." Before Evelyn could answer, Brittany turned to the receptionist. "It's all right, Leo. I'll take care of it." Leo looked grateful. Evelyn looked dangerous. Brittany gestured toward the hallway, leading Evelyn down a corridor lined with accolades, plaques with her name. Company of the Year awards. Press clippings. But in the center wall now hung a new photo. Connor and Brittany at the last Innovators Gala. Evelyn's image had once been there. She remembered the photographer's flash, the speech she gave, the standing ovation. All gone now. In the side conference room, Brittany handed her a folder. "Since you're here, just a heads up, we've had some restructuring." Evelyn opened the folder. The printed memo was dated 2 weeks ago. Subject line: Executive role transition. The bottom carried Connor's signature. Interim COO, Brittany Lane. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her voice, when it came, was almost gentle. Interim? And what interim circumstance prompted this? Brittany tilted her head, all poise. "Connor said you were taking a step back, more of a personal leave. For reflection. He didn't want to burden you." "I see." Evelyn didn't say more. She placed the folder on the table, aligning its edges with surgical precision. She noted the printer font, the file code at the top, the lack of board co-signature. Informal, rushed, meant to look routine. She turned toward the glass wall. Through it, she could see Connor pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't glance their way. Later, in the back of a black car sliding down Rainier Avenue, Evelyn called Melissa. "They've replaced me, not on paper, but in presence, in control." Melissa paused. "Are you serious? Without board approval?" "They didn't need the board. Not technically. He used my silence against me." "Evelyn, what are you going to do?" Evelyn looked out the window, watching buildings blur into trees. "I think I'm being erased," she tells Melissa, voice steady but eyes cold. "Red suits her, especially when she's trying to burn what I built." Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper, but the bitterness clung to every syllable like a scent that wouldn't wash off. She stared down at the screen Melissa had just tilted toward her. There it was. The photo, color-saturated, glossy, and unapologetically triumphant. Connor Hart, her husband of 7 years, seated at a tech summit with Brittany Lane perched beside him, arm grazing his, both smiling like they'd already won. The caption read, "Power couple to watch. Hart plus Lane's new face of innovation." Evelyn's thumb hovered over the image. Brittany was wearing a crimson sheath dress, lips matching, her hand delicately poised over Connor's. They looked coordinated, curated, and nowhere in the article, or the gallery of images, was Evelyn's name mentioned. Across the small round table, Melissa didn't say anything for a while. The cafe buzzed softly, dim lighting, a tenor sax weaving through the air like smoke. It was a place Evelyn had chosen for its anonymity. But suddenly, it felt too open, too exposed. She scanned the room, catching glances that weren't there, judging faces that hadn't turned. But it didn't matter. The shame already burned. "I wore white when we got married," Evelyn said, mostly to herself. "Clean lines, pearl buttons, no veil. He liked that, said I looked powerful. And now," Melissa leaned in, folding her hands, "now she wears red." Evelyn didn't answer. She tapped the screen again, enlarging the photo. The backdrop of the summit bore the company's name, Hart plus Lane Innovations. The irony of Brittany standing beneath it wasn't lost on her. "He brought her into our boardroom," Evelyn said slowly. "He's not hiding, he's taunting." At the next table, a pair of journalists from Seattle Business Weekly were chatting loudly about the summit. "Did you see how young the new COO is?" one said. "Smart move. Rebrands the company image completely. More millennial appeal. And Connor Hart knows how to stay relevant." The other chimed, "I mean, look at that body language. That's not just strategy. That's chemistry." Evelyn's grip tightened around her cup. Her coffee had gone cold. But she didn't care. Her body sat still. But inside, tectonic plates were shifting. She wasn't just replaced, she was being rewritten. Erased from the narrative in public. Where it would stick. Melissa finally broke the silence. You know what I think? Evelyn turned, eyes sharp. I think you shouldn't break. Outsmart him. The line fell into the space between them like a challenge. Like the opening note of something much louder. I stopped crying. I started printing. The machine buzzed softly in the corner, spitting out page after page, documents, scans, contracts Evelyn hadn't touched in years. She sat at her old desk, the one tucked into the corner of their home office, surrounded by dust and the stale scent of paper gone unused. The soft thud of the printer drum became a kind of metronome, steady, unrelenting. She hadn't been in this room for weeks. Not since before the earrings. Not since before Brittany's red dress. But tonight, she'd come with a purpose. Not sentiment. A row of labeled binders lined the bottom shelf. Evelyn pulled them out one by one, opening each with the same detachment she might use in surgery. No more emotion. No more questions. Just evidence. She opened the safe hidden behind a framed photograph, her and Connor. Years ago, laughing on a boat in Santorini. She didn't look at it. Just moved it aside. The code still worked. Inside, flash drives, equity certificates, and a manila folder thick with contracts. She carried it back to the desk, laying each paper down carefully. Her eyes scanned for what she knew had to be there. Inconsistencies. Mistakes. Ego always left fingerprints. 3 contracts in, she saw it. A small discrepancy in her signature. A flourish in the H she never used. The angle of the looped E wrong. She opened her tablet, pulled up scans of her actual signing patterns, then placed them side by side. One by one, she began marking the forgeries. Melissa's voice crackled through speakerphone. That's identity fraud. EV. If he's moved assets using your name. I need confirmation, Evelyn said calmly. Not suspicion. There was a knock at the side entrance, quiet. Coded. Logan Pierce stepped in, sleeves rolled, no tie, eyes sharp. A finance attorney with enough blood in the game to know when war was coming. He nodded to the table. You said you found discrepancies? Evelyn handed him the flagged documents. I need you to compare these with the originals in escrow. And check the asset transfers from the joint real estate fund. Any movement post-July. Logan flipped through quickly, whistled low. These signatures are provably not yours. She looked up, unblinking. You want to talk war? He nodded slowly, impressed. You're late to the battlefield. But not too late to win. He opened his laptop, already typing. Here's what we do. You establish an irrevocable trust. Move your remaining personal equity into it. We freeze any jointly held real estate until this gets sorted. And we get ahead of any divorce proceedings by forcing financial disclosure through legal motion. Do it, Evelyn said. Also, he added, you're going to want a forensic accountant. I already called one. She'll loop in by tomorrow. The printer chimed. Another batch complete. Evelyn stood, gathering the warm pages in both hands. They weren't just paper. They were leverage. Start drafting a trust, and freeze the real estate assets. He didn't just bring her. He brought her to court. In Louboutins. The heel clicks echoed before she saw them, sharp, deliberate, unmistakably designer. Brittany emerged from the black SUV first. Red soles flashing against the courthouse steps. Her coat was ivory, her smile brighter. Connor followed a half step behind. Fingers interlaced with hers, jaw set, eyes already scanning the press gathered near the entrance. Evelyn didn't blink. She watched from across the street. Shielded by tinted windows. The media had shown up in full, cameras poised. Questions already shouted into the cold October air. Mrs. Hart, do you have a response to the allegations? Is Hart plus Lane dissolving? Connor paused for a photo op. Brittany leaned in, as if whispering something supportive. The image was unmistakable. Unity. Boldness. Control. The message was clear. We're winning. But inside the courthouse, the ground was shifting. The marble floors glistened under institutional lighting. Evelyn walked with Logan beside her. Chin level. Pulse steady. Her black suit was immaculate, understated but powerful. Not a statement of mourning, but of readiness. You remember what to say if pressed? Logan asked under his breath. I remember everything, Evelyn replied. They entered courtroom 3C just before the session began. Brittany was already seated beside Connor. Legs crossed. That same smug angle to her smile. Evelyn didn't look at her. She focused on the judge, middle-aged. Unsentimental. The kind who cared more about paperwork than optics. The clerk called the case. Evelyn stood. Your Honor, we're filing for an emergency injunction to freeze joint-held assets and require immediate disclosure of financial transfers dated after July 1. Connor shifted in his seat. On what grounds? Logan didn't let him finish. Evidence submitted indicates unauthorized movement of capital and forged signatures, names used without legal consent. We have handwriting analysis, notarization mismatches, and 3 asset shifts routed through shell accounts Ms. Hart was unaware of. Brittany leaned over to whisper, but her voice carried, "This is desperate." Evelyn finally looked at her. "No, Brittany, this is documented." The judge reviewed the stack of documents quickly but thoroughly. After a tense 10-minute pause, she spoke. The court grants a temporary freeze on all co-owned real estate and investment vehicles. Pending further review, full financial disclosure will be required within 10 business days. Connor's mask cracked. When did she do this? Brittany turned, stunned. Her mouth opened, but no words came. As the judge rose and the courtroom emptied, Logan leaned toward Connor, voice low and crisp. While you were making headlines, she was making moves. They're not just rewriting history, they're doing it with hashtags. Evelyn scrolled slowly, the glow of her phone screen casting cold light across the bedroom ceiling. It was barely 6 a.m., but the storm had already begun. Hashtag PowerShift. Hashtag NextGen Leadership. Hashtag Brittany Bold. Dozens of headlines peppered her feed, some professional, others dripping with tabloid sheen. Hart plus Lane's new era. Brittany Lane ushers in bold innovation. From intern to icon. Behind the boardroom breakup, they showed glossy photos of Brittany speaking on panels, standing beside Connor at tech galas. Always polished, always beaming. Evelyn's name only appeared in sidebars, paired with phrases like, estranged wife, former partner, allegedly removed. Melissa called as if on cue. Morning, you seeing what I'm seeing? Evelyn turned off the screen. They're trying to bury me. But they're doing it in designer heels and filters. She gave an interview to Founders Now. Called you formidable but resistant to pivoting. Said the company had to evolve beyond legacy thinking. Legacy thinking. Evelyn almost smiled. Cute. Melissa sighed. You need a PR counter. I know someone, Clara Givens. Media strategy. She worked damage control for the Beaumont collapse. She'll be honest. Brutal if needed. I don't want spin. I want results. You can do both. I'm not going to fight them on headlines. Evelyn said. I'll fight them on paper. Where it counts. She opened her laptop, the screen flashing with document trackers, court updates, and a cluster of email threads. One caught her attention. Logan's name in the subject line. The email opened to a screenshot. A licensing approval for a new Hart plus Lane subsidiary, overseas. Expedited, and marked with Evelyn's digital signature. She didn't authorize it. The deal was pushed through last week. Brittany Lane had signed off as acting partner, using Evelyn's e-sign credentials. Logan's note below was brief. They didn't just cross a line. They obliterated it. Evelyn leaned back, exhaling slowly. She just gave me everything I need. My father didn't believe in second chances. He believed in hidden ones. Evelyn stood in the quiet law office, fingers tracing the leather binding of the estate folder that hadn't been touched in nearly a decade. The place smelled like old books and polished wood. And outside, autumn leaves gathered in damp clumps against the window. The past had a way of waiting for the right season to resurface. The estate attorney, a bespectacled man named Drummond who had known her father since college, adjusted his glasses. You're certain you want to reopen this clause? I'm not reopening it, Evelyn said. I'm invoking it. He nodded slowly, flipping through the pages with practiced care. Your father was meticulous. He didn't believe in loopholes. But he built safety nets in layers. Let's see. Here. He turned the folder, pointing to a page Evelyn had skimmed countless times but never fully absorbed. Tucked within the fine print of the Hart plus Lane Foundational Funding Agreement was a clause labeled simply, Fiduciary Integrity Provision. If any equity partner is found in breach of ethical conduct, defined here as misrepresentation, fraud, or willful concealment of financial risk, the founding stakeholder with dormant proxy rights may activate controlling vote status. Temporarily or permanently. Evelyn didn't blink. So my inheritance gave me proxy votes. But they go active when? When someone betrays the company. Logan finished, arms crossed beside her. It's watertight. Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope she'd never had the courage to open until last night. Her father's handwriting, steady and exact. She slid out the letter and read the final lines aloud. This trust isn't about possession. It's about protection. You don't owe anyone your silence. Especially if they've banked on it. Logan let out a breath. You know what this means, right? I can convene a board meeting, she said, and suspend Connor. Not just legally, officially, publicly. Drummond nodded. With documentation of the fraudulent licensing deal. You won't just have grounds. You'll have votes. Enough to tip control. Evelyn folded the letter, tucked it back into her coat. He married my name, but I kept my father's mind. Back in her office that evening, Evelyn opened her laptop and created a new encrypted message. She typed the subject slowly. Each word deliberate. Shareholder emergency, November 3rd. Then she hit send. He walked in like he still owned the air. I was the one who controlled the oxygen. The double doors opened, and Connor Hart strode in, flanked by Brittany, both of them dressed in crisp, photogenic precision. His navy suit was tailored within a millimeter. Her sheath dress, a deep, strategic plum, clung like it had been sewn on with intent. He nodded at a few familiar faces around the polished conference table. Walking like the floor had been laid just for him. But the air didn't shift for him anymore. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, her hands resting lightly on a bound dossier. Expression neutral. Logan sat to her left, already connecting his laptop to the projector. The blinds behind them had been drawn shut against the Seattle skyline, turning the room into a pressure chamber of light, breath, and precision. Let's begin, Evelyn said. No welcome, no pleasantries. Connor opened his mouth, perhaps to joke, perhaps to reclaim space. She didn't let him. As per Section 9 of our charter agreement, she continued, this emergency meeting is convened under the Founder's Ethics Clause. Supporting documentation has been distributed to all voting members. Mr. Pierce will now present key findings. Logan clicked. The screen behind him came alive with timelines. Names, emails. To summarize, he said coolly, in the last 6 weeks, Ms. Lane authorized 3 licensing agreements using Ms. Hart's e-signature without consent. At least one of these contracts involves an overseas shell entity connected to a suspended client. That constitutes fraud. Brittany straightened. That's absurd. The digital credentials were revoked in August. Logan interjected, which makes their use not only unauthorized but willfully deceptive. Connor stepped forward. This isn't how we resolve internal disputes. You're weaponizing technicalities. Evelyn turned toward the board. My father's clause wasn't a technicality. It was foresight, and it activates under ethical breach. Which this is. Silence reigned. Then, one by one, the board members nodded, some reluctantly, some emphatically. Evelyn continued, I am formally suspending Mr. Hart's voting rights pending audit resolution. I am also moving to terminate Ms. Lane's interim COO designation. A beat. Then a second. The chair of the board finally spoke. Motion seconded. All in favor? Hands rose, 7 of them. Connor's jaw flexed. You can't do this. I already did, Evelyn said, voice even. Brittany stood abruptly, knocking her chair sideways. She looked around, waiting for someone to object, to defend. No one did. She stormed out without another word. Connor remained frozen, eyes locked on the woman at the head of the table, his wife. His former equal, now the only person in the room everyone was listening to. Evelyn turned, slowly, deliberately, and took her seat at the head of the table. He thought I'd beg. I signed instead. The courthouse looked the same. But Evelyn didn't. Her stride was purposeful, her gaze forward. The same white marble floor that once reflected her hesitations now echoed with heels that carried no doubt. No cameras waited outside this time. She hadn't invited them. She didn't need to. In courtroom 4B, she met Logan beside the bench. The documents were neatly stacked, bound with a blue ribbon. She slid the divorce petition across the desk. Pen poised. You're sure? Logan asked. Yes, she said simply, and signed. 7 strokes of ink to end 7 years of marriage. They didn't wait long. Connor arrived mid-hearing, breath short, blazer unbuttoned like he'd dressed in a hurry. His eyes scanned the room before landing on her. Evie, he said, walking toward her. This is rushed. We can. No, she said. His mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Logan handed him a manila envelope, the courtesy copy. Evelyn didn't flinch as Connor scanned the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. You moved everything, he finally said. The trust, the real estate, even the stocks. You taught me how to pivot, she said. I just finally did. From the hallway beyond, Brittany's voice echoed, sharp, angry, distant. She was on the phone, shouting about lawyers, inheritance, and something she wasn't given. Her voice faded into a dull buzz as the courtroom doors closed. The judge didn't take long. Based on the filed documentation and the irrevocable trust established prior to separation, the petitioner retains sole rights to inherited assets, including voting shares and any real property held before the marriage. Connor blinked. That trust wasn't active. It was, Evelyn said, just not in your name. Outside, the air was cool, clear. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter, not out of chill but to mark the end of something. Logan handed her a small black card. She read the gold lettering aloud. Keynote speaker, Women in Finance. December 12th. They finally want to hear your voice, Logan said. Evelyn smiled, quiet, calm. So do I. He lost his money. I found my reflection. The ballroom glowed in soft gold, chandeliers flickering gently above rows of attentive faces. It smelled faintly of fresh hydrangeas and the starch of pressed linen, details Evelyn noticed now. Because nothing blurred anymore, she stood behind the glass podium, fingers resting lightly on its edge. Her voice calm, clear. This isn't a story about marriage, she said. Not entirely. She scanned the room. Young women in suits and flats and cautious ambition. Some clutched notebooks. Others stared as if willing the courage from her into themselves. It's about trust, she continued. Not the legal kind, though I've learned a lot about that too. It's about the kind you place in people, in promises, in yourself, and what happens when it breaks. Melissa sat in the front row, eyes glistening, her hands folded in support. I once built a company with someone I loved, Evelyn said, and then I rebuilt myself without him. The silence wasn't my weakness, it was my strategy. And when the time came, I didn't need to shout. I just needed to sign. She paused, letting the quiet settle. The audience leaned in. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it signs papers. Applause erupted, some standing, some still stunned in place. Evelyn nodded, gracious, and stepped down. In the back, Logan stood with his arms crossed, an unreadable expression softening into something like admiration. He approached slowly as the crowd began to disperse. You left a few things out, he said. I had a time limit. He offered a tentative smile. So, coffee? Evelyn slipped her clutch under one arm, the heels of her shoes clicking lightly on the polished floor as she passed him. You'll have to book me. Logan laughed, falling into step beside her as the doors opened to the bright winter afternoon. Evelyn didn't look back, not at the ballroom, not at the company, not at the man who once stood beside her in stolen light. She only moved forward, reflection intact, voice reclaimed, future unwritten. He tried to bury her beneath scandal and shadows. But she rose, silent, deliberate, and undeniable. In the end, he lost the company, the headlines, and the woman he underestimated most. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens, sometimes. It comes quietly, through contracts, courtrooms, and clarity. When injustice is met with unwavering resolve, the verdict echoes far beyond the courtroom walls. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is not fury, but freedom.